You are now entering. Hell in the Pod.
Welcome back to another edition of Hell in the Pod. Today I'm here with special guest Jared Wicks from Heel to the Face podcast. Jared, how are you?
I'm doing good on this Saturday evening. Normally be watching a pay-per-view at this time, but thanks to the time slot earlier in the day, we're all done with that.
Yep. So today was the day that King and Queen of the Ring was Saudi Arabia. It just got done, I don't know, hour or so ago. But to move on from the pay-per-view and side rants, let's get into Hell in the Pod. So I think Jared has one of the best wrestling podcast names other than the one that he's on right now, Hell in the Pod, Heel to the Face podcast. So I want to actually start off a little bit more. How did you get into wrestling, and what's your earliest memory or early introduction to pro wrestling?
So I can tell you 100% how I got into wrestling was one specific show, and it's crazy because I don't want to give my age, but I'm a little bit older to the sense that I was in middle school during the debut episode of SmackDown. Now I didn't have cable television growing up. We only just had traditional TV. And a friend of mine who was a wrestling fan told me that there was this pilot show going to be on regular TV called SmackDown. It wasn't when it was a series yet; it was just by itself. And it was on Thursday night, and I was like, all right, you know what? I'll check it out. I think True Lies was in reruns on Fox that night, so I'm probably going to watch True Lies, but I'll check out wrestling. And I used to always give my friends crap who did watch wrestling. It's stupid, it's fake. It's super silly. Watch real sports. And I watched that pilot episode of SmackDown knowing nothing. And it was right in the middle of the Attitude Era. And it like whetted my appetite because after that, there wasn't SmackDown for another like 6 months. But I watched it. I was like, that was really awesome. Like I cared about what was going on. I didn't really, the matches were like secondary to the stories. There was the Godfather. There was like Val Venus. It was just like crazy. And I took 6 months off and it was like, okay, well, I don't get it from now on, but when it comes back, I'll check it out again. And when it came back as a regular show in the fall, I watched it religiously every single week. And it was like a couple months later, me asking questions like, what are pay-per-views? I see No Mercy is coming up. What is that? Why are they not fighting for the title on SmackDown? What is Raw? What's the difference? And just kind of getting into all that. And I would say the first pay-per-view I watched live was WrestleMania 2000. At a friend's house. But SmackDown, the pilot episode, 1999, that's what got me into it right there. I had known about wrestling, but I knew not much about it. And then the SmackDown 1999 pilot episode was the first time. Like I said, I was going back and forth between SmackDown and a movie, and then I just found myself watching SmackDown and being like, I gotta see this Godfather guy. He's coming out after the commercial. I gotta see more of this guy. And that's just been it ever since. And, as my parents probably thought I would grow out of it like everybody else, but I did not. I still watch it, and I still watch it, for the same reasons of I'm more interested in like story, and I'm more interested. And I think that's the thing too, is somebody who my favorite part of sports is not always just the sports. It's the E60 documentaries and the behind the scenes stuff. I would watch more. HBO Real Sports I watched now that it's over with, but I watched it more than I would care about watching just a football game. I'd want to watch like Real Sports documentary about it. And that's kind of stuff in the wrestling that I'm interested in more, the why than the what, and the behind the scenes stuff. So wrestling gives you that. Like the Super Bowl every year is going to happen regardless. It can have the worst matchup, but it's going to happen either way. All these championships are going to happen either way. They're going to contend them no matter what. And WrestleMania is going to happen either way, but they script it so that it is WrestleMania every year. And it's not just who just happens to be in the picture, but and that's what I love. It's a, mix of movie. It's a mix of sports. I do miss the days of kayfabe a little bit. I do think there's too much, given away. And listen, we all know what it is, obviously, but the idea that they don't really let the illusion sit for too long. I can think of like Bray Wyatt when he wrestled in the match just last year, the Mountain Dew Pitch Black match.
Yep.
It was in that press conference. He was already out of character.
Yeah.
Like And it's difficult because then on Monday Night Raw, he's going to be back in character. Like, so I love these behind the scenes WrestleMania documentaries. I just wish you would wait maybe like a year or two before you put them out. We don't need to
Right.
talk about, we don't need to
Yeah,
see
we used to
Cody
have to
Rhodes.
go
Yeah.
years before we got like a solo wrestlers full documentary video as well as like the behind the scenes. I get what you mean by lag that out for sure. And speaking about this year's WrestleMania, in my lifetime, I don't think we'll ever see a WrestleMania quite like that one.
In what way? What was? I mean, obviously there was the John Cena, the Undertaker, the whole coming together of generations, which was really cool.
It was the Bloodline storyline that's, I mean, still going. Cody Rhodes coming back and actually finish it. Like, I think everybody was also just so used to Roman winning every single time that when the third hand came down to the mat, it was like they really let it happen for one. And not only did they let it happen, you had the Usos going off the stage. You had all these pieces of the movie coming together, the final boss coming out. Obviously, the Undertaker kind of popping up out of nowhere, but you know what I mean? It was still kind of like, I don't know how you're going to recreate that feeling that generations of wrestling fans at that very moment felt. You know what I mean? Because you had me who grew up watching, The Rock and The Undertaker and John Cena. And then you got the new guys, you know what I'm saying? Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. And to have all those feelings that I had watching, I don't think they can recreate that again. You know,
Well, and
especially
also
the
too,
way it was produced too.
it
By
was
the way,
very organic because of the fact that you got to think about the fact that Cody Rhodes was solidly, and not just coming out like later on a couple years later, but in 2020, Cody Rhodes was solidly in AEW when Roman Reigns became champion. So there was no way that when Roman Reigns became the champion right after SummerSlam in 2020, that the thought was this is going to take us up to you losing the belt to Cody Rhodes down the line. Because Cody Rhodes wasn't even a thought then, right? He was solidly in AEW at that time. So, I mean, it really happened organically in that sense of letting him hold on to the belt. And I will say to all the naysayers out there who were, upset that he had the belt for so long and were complaining the whole time, the one thing I just want to say is wrestling has been going on for so long, and there are so many different variations. In the year 2000, I think the title changed hands 12 times. So you have an opportunity to get all of that. And I understand that people want things now, but the idea that, Roman got to do this, like you said, we'll probably never see this again. And I was enjoying seeing it. It was the most I've liked Roman Reigns because I wasn't ever a really big Roman Reigns fan like people were before. They hated him when he won at
right.
WrestleMania 32 and he was the ultra good guy. So I liked this Roman Reigns. And I guess my thing is I liked him winning over and over again because it just kept dragging out. Because now Cody Rhodes has the belt and it's back to normalcy where like I feel he could lose the belt and have it probably by SummerSlam or after SummerSlam and kind of play hot potato with the championship again. But I liked when Roman Reigns had the championship, it just kept building. And people said, well, how high can you get? And I understand there's probably a limit to that, but just it's like the Undertaker's streak, right? If he lost after 5 years of WrestleMania, no one would be talking about a streak. But when it started to build, you just wanted to see it go because every single year you were interested in the Undertaker's match, even if he's facing Mark Henry, because of the streak. And you're watching Roman Reigns, and you have to make sure to tune in. You know he's probably going to win, but at the same time, you can't not be there when the quote-unquote streak of Roman Reigns ends. So you're watching Backlash, you're watching Elimination Chamber, you're watching all of these title defenses because you know that each and every time he gets in the ring, I mean, when that happens, it's going to be huge. And that's why I loved about it. And yeah, now we can go back to people being fans of Cody Rhodes and winning the belt and stuff. Listen, he was going to win the belt down the line. That's okay. I'm just one of those people that knows I'm going to be around for the next 30 or 40 years, hopefully. So I'm one of those people that doesn't need things today. When I go on vacation, I don't need to go to this place today because that place will be around next year. So it's the same idea, when he was winning the championship, people are like, I wish Cody Rhodes had been about. Like, listen, neither of these guys are going anywhere. In the world of WWE, people are wrestling into their 60s. You got Sting still going up until a few months ago. You had Hulk Hogan going pretty late in his life. So there was no rush. And I liked the Roman Reigns thing. It was awesome for the time that it was. And it was a harken back to old days. I mean, where you had a champion like Hulk Hogan, or you had a champion that held the belt for such an extended period of time. And I really, really like that. It gave the belt. And to be honest with you, Cody Rhodes, people want Cody Rhodes to win, but I can tell you what, now that Cody Rhodes is the champion, he is probably happier that it happened the way that it happened, because he has a championship that he essentially took off of this generation's Hulk Hogan, versus just being a champion he took off of Dolph Ziggler.
100%. And that's another thing too, that I was actually just speaking about earlier with somebody. The way that they're going to have to make this thing with Cody, like you're going to have to build Cody to a god-like figure like they did Roman now. And if not, if you do play hot potato with it, what did he win it for? You know what I mean? Just to say he finished the story, like you have to build. That's why when they first mentioned the match at tonight, actually with Logan Paul and whatnot, I thought he was going to become the Grand Slam champion and take the belt off of Cody, and they were going to start kind of adding the rings to the gauntlet for Cody and all these accolades to build up his run. Because like I said, I feel like they have to make him a god like they made Roman a god. But speaking about beforehand, you got into wrestling like middle schoolish, SmackDown's pilot. So you were right around the Monday Night Wars. Were you a WCW or were you a WWE guy?
Oh, I was again, because of SmackDown, I was a WWE guy. And again, not having cable television, there really wasn't a war for me. I did watch when I started really getting into wrestling. Really, the only WCW that I caught was the stuff that was on like the recap shows on the weekends. But yeah, not having cable television and, pretty much all the way through high school. When I got into wrestling, I started having people tape the other stuff for me. We do like the tape trading in high school, give me last night's Monday Night Raw and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I was never a WCW guy for that fact that they didn't have the television shows on the channels I got. So I was always I was a SmackDown guy, probably more than anything than WWE.
That's hilarious. I was a SmackDown guy. Is great.
You know what I mean? So I was a SmackDown. It was even actually kind of funny because there was a time where we lost the channel to watch SmackDown in my area. And because I was just so used to SmackDown, I still liked Raw and stuff like that. But because I was so used to watching SmackDown, that became the show I wanted people to tape the most and give me the episodes of, because I felt like I had lost my main thing. Because I was always used to not watching Raw and watching that on a tape. But like not watching SmackDown, I was like, well, I got to keep up on SmackDown, even though we don't have this in our area. Right. So I was always a big guy. Like I wish I was. I would have never been necessarily a WCW guy. It's hard to look back on it, but WCW was like the AEW of that time, and I definitely would have watched it. I would have checked it out. I would have known more about it. I would have loved to be in Syracuse, and like David Arquette won the championship, but I didn't know what that was. What Thunder? Like that's a WCW show. I don't know what that is. But if SmackDown was coming to town that year, I would have been all about it.
So, I mean, I feel like you kind of just answered this next question, but if there is a war right now between AEW and WWE, who's winning?
Well, I don't think there's a war. I think WWE is winning, and that's fine. My thing is, I don't, and that's the issue. There isn't really a war. People try to make it out, and I don't really understand. I think WWE is winning on two fronts. One, they're obviously such a juggernaut. They're synonymous with wrestling. When you think of wrestling, you think of WWE. You don't think of AEW. But WWE is actually grateful to have an AEW around, because think about the talent that keeps fresh for WWE to grow. I know WWE loves to get people down at the developmental center through NXT. But I love that there's a company out there like an AEW that makes it so that we know people coming in. When MJF comes into WWE, we're going to know exactly who that is, the same way we knew who AJ Styles was thanks to TNA Impact. Yep. So, I'm glad AEW exists for that reason. But it's clearly WWE that is the juggernaut right now. If it's not even a war, right? I can't even say that. But at the same time, that's not to take away from AEW, because I have to say I was skeptical, because TNA Impact existed, and TNA Impact existed for many years and tried going against WWE, and it never took off. And it had Samoa Joe, it had AJ Styles, it had huge names, the Dudley Boys, Sting, Kurt Angle,
Jeff Jarrett, Jeff Hardy,
all these guys. And for some reason, I mean, it literally couldn't leave the Impact Zone. So when AEW first came around, I thought this is like, why? Like, why is this? We already have a failed second product, TNA. So why are we creating this product? And to be around, I mean, people really forget to have a weekly television show in front of an arena crowd, not in front of a studio, but in front of like 2,000 or 3,000 people traveling city to city. That's pretty impressive. And, you know, whether obviously they're getting 20,000 or whatever, like WWE is for SmackDown and Raws, it doesn't matter. The fact is that they're set up TV cameras. They're getting 5,000 people in, you know, in New York State, and next week they're getting in California, and the week after in Texas, is impressive by itself. There's really no other companies. TNA is doing really good for what they're doing, but they still, I mean, they're drawing whenever they do anything, it's 1,000 people at best. So to be a product that is just even discussed as an alternative and that is, you know, filling up arenas, I never thought I'd see the day. I can just say that. I never thought that I would see the day where there's another product out there that is traveling the globe week in and week out in arenas, whether they're big or small, but, you know, arenas nonetheless, and getting multiple thousands of people on a weekly basis while WWE exists. I like WCW did back in the day. And like I said, WCW it existed because it came about, you know, similar to WWE, but I never thought another company would even exist to that level again.
Right.
And I think it's awesome that it does, because even if you don't, what I love about, and similar to watching UFC, I'm not a big UFC guy, but
I am.
I love watching pay-per-views when I know the people and catching it casually. I enjoy UFC. I've gone to some UFC pay-per-views in the past, you know, and recognized the people. Max Holloway, I went to one against Anthony Pettis. I think like Cowboy Donald Cerrone was on that card. And I enjoyed myself. I didn't know all the buildup leading up to them. But it's like that with AEW, right? I went to AEW Revolution. I thought I had an amazing time. It was great. And if AEW Dynamite comes around where it's within driving distance, I'll go see it. I don't have to follow it on a week to week. I don't have to know it as good as I know WWE, but it's awesome that it exists as something to do. It's like minor league sports in a town, you know. Even if you're not a huge fan of the minor league sports team that's in the town or anything like that, as long it being there as something to do, you know, is awesome.
And also just something to talk about as well.
Yeah, yeah, especially too when it comes to like another place for talent to hone their craft, to be known. Like I said, when MJF or Kenny Omega ever come into WWE or the Young Bucks or anything like that, we'll know who they are. We know about them. It's great to not just be, when you're a wrestling podcast, it makes it so that you can be a wrestling podcast and not just a WWE podcast.
100%. I like that. I like the way you put that too. A wrestling podcast, not just a branded podcast. So speaking about, so you're a SmackDown guy, honed in and following SmackDown hard when you first get into wrestling. Who were some of your favorites to watch back then?
My favorite, I mean, there was Kurt Angle. I was a big fan of the heels back then. I guess it's similar. I won't lie. I went and saw the Harlem Globetrotters, and I like cheered against them just because I thought that would be different and cool. So it's the same idea. Kurt Angle. I liked the heel in Kurt Angle. One wrestler that I liked a lot, and I actually just saw their t-shirt on eBay, and I bought it at my very first ever WWE show. I went to Monday Night Raw 2 weeks before WrestleMania 17. That was the first ever show I ever went to. And I bought this shirt, and I wish I still had it because it was like $1,000 on eBay. But a Rikishi shirt. I don't know why I gravitated towards Rikishi, but I liked him, so I bought his shirt at the very first ever WWE show I went to in 2001. But Kurt Angle I was a huge Kurt Angle fan back in the day. I don't know why I popped for The Rock. Like when The Rock's music hit or Stone Cold hit and you're like at the event, there's nothing greater. There was literally nothing greater than when like Stone Cold or The Rock came out when you were at an event in the year 2000. But yeah, Kurt Angle, I really gravitated towards him right away. I think because of the fact that he was a main event player, but he was just on the outside. So it was like watching that sports team. Like if you just get into football nowadays, right? It's easy to get into like the Kansas City Chiefs. It's easy to get in to one of these major teams. But if you're just starting, you don't want to take a bottom dweller. You want to take a team that's like, hey, they've never done anything since you've been watching them, but they're like on the cusp. They're going to be in there. If you only can watch Monday Night Football, they're going to be on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football. So they're not on the bottom. They're definitely a player. But when they win the championship or they do something great, you're going to be there at the ground floor like everybody else. I guess you'd say like the Buffalo Bills would be like that now.
Right.
They're in the mix, but they're not. You didn't miss out on the championships. If you're a Yankee fan and you're a Yankee and you just become one in 2000, you missed out on like everything they've already done. And so Kurt Angle was like, I started watching wrestling in the year 99, early 2000s was my first year watching wrestling. And he was like the IC champion. He was a European champion. He was in the summer of 2000 starting to contend for the championship. So I was right there in the ground floor when he became champion in 2000 and just seeing that kind of build up. As well as being a heel. I don't know. It's just easy to root for him because like it's just the most heels are always the most entertaining.
All American too. It was cool to watch him come from like being a real like a wrestling gold medalist too, and then watching that storyline. Just I'm a freaking gold medalist. How dare you boo me? How dare you tell me I suck? It was just dope to see that. As well as I really liked him as Perk Angle too in TNA. I mean, savage run in the TNA game as well. So Kurt Angle is definitely. I think Kurt Angle has to be in my Mount Rushmore. If I'm not gonna lie,
I don't, and I guess that's one thing about wrestling that's different too than other sports. Is you are more of a fan of like a product or something like that versus a team, because people always say who do you want to win these matches all the time, and you're like I love good matches more than I care about a guy. But I will say after Kurt Angle, from then on out, my guy was 100% Triple H. And I think Triple H got me in the year 2001. He had a 3 stages in hell match at No Way Out against Stone Cold Steve Austin. The championship wasn't on the line. The match went 45 minutes. And at that time, I had never seen anything like that. 45 minutes in a wrestling ring. I wasn't jaded with New Japan or any of the other stuff. So 45 minutes, him and Stone Cold going at it. And I guess my thing is I didn't know better. I didn't, like I said, no New Japan or any of the other. So he was like the first person I saw that was like a really good wrestler. And that was like, wow, he's like actually like good at this more than just being a giant, more than just being the character. He looks like just a good athlete. Like in the year 2000, he went 1 hour with The Rock. Like he said, he went 45 minutes in 2001 in a non-title match that you didn't know that was going to happen. You're just watching the pay-per-view and you're going to go, okay, this is just your mid-card match, probably go 20 minutes or something, and go 45 minutes. And like I said, without it being like a timed Iron Man match, was just a complete new thing to me. So big Triple H fan. And I would probably say, he's got to be number one on my all-time list for me as fandom.
Triple H is he's one of the guys who I like to watch. I actually remember the first time I ever seen him. So I got into wrestling like I don't know, I was probably about 4 or so, 98-ish, 99, and I got to see live him come back off the knee surgery with the tuxedo, the Canadian tuxedo with the black leather sewn in with his logo. And I just remember ever since then, I either hated him or I loved him, and it's because of how well he did what he did. And evolution, he and all the way to now with like the business and the way he's carrying WWE. I'm still a huge Triple A. I'm a Paul Levesque guy.
I will say, I'm a big Triple H fan, but I give him a lot more grief as of late because of the fact that, listen, his story, his writing, and that is really awesome. And I definitely believe in what like Stephanie McMahon said at WrestleMania, that there's nobody who loves the product more than Triple H.
Right.
I just have the one caveat, and it's not necessarily his fault, but now that TKO and Endeavor own WWE, he has to be the spokesman for a lot of things that they do, and essentially kind of write it off as, just give the excuses for why and kind of write it off as like, that's part of the plan. And there's like a few times where there is like some criticism, right? There's some criticism, I think, at a press conference. I don't know if it was the one right after WrestleMania, but like, he gets asked a hard question and he has to kind of give the status quo answer. One thing that I've been very critical of as of late with Triple H is the fact that when he came out and he said about like the small stages and the lack of production, as saying that was a strategic idea to allow more fans into the arena, as we saw WrestleMania weekend with 20,000 and stuff. But obviously since then they've kept the small stage, right? And he's, like I said, gone down and saying that that is the reason behind that is so we can fit more people in arenas. Well, unfortunately, after WrestleMania, there is the traditional lull, and there is the things like we saw last week where Greensboro only sold the TV side of things, which is fine. There's 8,000 people in the arena. It's a 20,000 seat arena, but it's an 8,000 seat arena. But it shows you that having the small stage is more of a production cost side of things, letting in one less truck than it is for needing to fill that. Listen, if you want to fill more seats, I'm all about that. I think that's great. I used to love back in the Attitude Era. If you remember, like the pay-per-views, they had the small stages, and like WrestleMania 14, they'd come out of just that little circle, and the whole place was full for even like King of the Ring 98 and stuff like that. So I'm definitely all about that. But trying to say like, oh yeah, we're all about having the small stage only because we want to fit more people in the arenas, even when you're in an arena where you're not selling it to begin with. It's that kind of having to speak on behalf of TKO of, hey, we're doing this because it's better for the fans. We're having less fireworks because, the fans don't really care about it. Like, I don't like those kinds of things. And he has to be kind of a spokesman for TKO. When it comes to writing wrestling, I think he's doing an amazing job. Great job. But kind of like having to come out and do all this other stuff where he's saying that, hey, this was the most successful SmackDown we've ever had, and glossing over the fact that it was the most successful SmackDown because tickets in France were $500 to get in the door, and there was only 11,000 people at this SmackDown. When I've gone to a SmackDown just in the last 2 months, there was 20,000 the night before WrestleMania, and that 11,000 seat SmackDown is now the best SmackDown, or the most successful SmackDown. And he glossed over the fact because tickets were absurdly priced, and that he essentially priced it out for the regular person to go. I don't care for that. But, like I said, he's got to be a spokesman for the company now. And I wish he didn't have to, because, again, it kind of makes it so that it kind of puts it on him when he has to answer for something, in one of these press conferences where they go like, hey, how come, you're going to Saudi Arabia? I remember, back in the day, right? WWE still hasn't really ever said the real answer, right? They haven't said, oh, they're paying us a ton of money. They say these things like, well, their fans are just really great and they want us to come here because they got such good fans.
Yeah, good PR move. Yeah.
That kind of
we
stuff.
all get that. And we also, I feel like it's, like you said earlier, the kayfabe's like kind of almost dead now. You can tell us, you know what I mean? Like, we see what's going on here. Say it, you know what I mean? Just like you said, you might as well just say what's real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But even everything you answer so far, you've been to so many shows, and you've been to so many shows around the world and locally. What's been your favorite experience so far?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I mean, you've been to Sting's final match too. Like,
yes. I mean, that I will say, that was really awesome. And it wasn't, again, I didn't grow up watching Sting or anything like that. I did obviously watch him in the later years. So it's not like this was some major thing like going back to the 80s for me. I just thought, the way that pay-per-view was put together, the atmosphere at the event, I really liked. I've never been to the Greensboro Coliseum before, or Greensboro, North Carolina, and I thought that was just like a really awesome city that has a lot of history. Whether it's just basketball history or wrestling history, it's got a lot of cool history for the size of a city that is, not being in New York or in LA or something like that. It's difficult to pin down like favorite. I will say, I remember New Year's Revolution, where Edge cashed in Money in the Bank. I was on cloud nine when that happened because of the fact that John Cena had been champion for the better part of the last 2 years. And to see him dethroned in front of me, like at that time, I'd never been to WrestleMania or Royal Rumble or any major event. This is just an in-your-house kind of pay-per-view. And to be there and to see John Cena no longer the champion and see the first Money in the Bank cash-in, which I thought was going to happen at WrestleMania. So to be at like a lesser event and get the lesser event result where everyone retains. And you're like, I went to the pay-per-view I went to prior to that was a Great American Bash where Batista retained. So to see the status quo happen and to just go, all right, John Cena is not going to lose the belt. It's, we're in Albany, New York. This is a B-show pay-per-view. The big crowds down the line, they're going to get it. And someday, hopefully, I'll get to go to a WrestleMania and see something cool. And then to see that happen right in front of me was awesome. The Hardy Boys coming back at WrestleMania 33. I thought was awesome. I like popped crazy for that. That's probably
just my guy. So that was really cool to see too.
I think it was really cool for the fact that the night before they were wrestling in Ring of Honor, in a match in a arena, literally in Orlando. So they're like booked that weekend. So all the rumors of them being in WWE, you're like, well, they're wrestling. They're booked that weekend.
Right.
They like can't be there, obviously, because they're doing other things. And actually, in downtown Orlando, there was like a block party that was sponsored by the Hardy Boys, and it had like local indie wrestlers and had food trucks and stuff like that. So as I'm walking to WrestleMania at like 4 or 5 o'clock that afternoon, I'm walking by this block party that's got their face on it that they're sponsoring. So clearly they're not a part of WWE. Like there isn't that quick of a turnaround, I thought, right?
Right.
So to have them at WrestleMania was not just them returning, but literally being like, oh my, I can't believe it's really them. Like their
Right.
block party is going on right now. It's similar to this year at WrestleMania. I went to, and not to the same crazy extent. Now I know better, but like I went to a pre-party at the ECW arena before WrestleMania this year, with Busted Open Radio, and like Bubba Ray Dudley's there because he's one of the hosts. And then later on in the night, you see him at WrestleMania as the guest referee for one of the matches.
Yeah.
Not as crazy of a thing, but yeah, the Matt Hardys and the Jeff Hardy returning at that pay-per-view. I popped pretty hard for that. And to be fair, I popped pretty hard for the Roman Reigns retaining at any of the WrestleManias he retained, specifically WrestleMania 39. That was a huge moment because every year you go to WrestleMania, it seems foregone, especially before Roman Reigns. You win the Royal Rumble, you go on, the face becomes the champion, the heel walks away, and that's kind of predictable. Roman Reigns doing it at AT&T Stadium at WrestleMania 32. You kind of expect those things to happen, right? Becky Lynch winning at WrestleMania 35 in New York City, like you saw those things happen. Seth Rollins early in the night beat Brock Lesnar,
Right.
But so Roman retaining over Cody Rhodes was a real shocker to me. I did not see that happening because of the fact that you're like, well, they've built this up as far as they can. Clearly, he's not winning. Like Cody Rhodes is going to win this. He's been talking about coming back to the company solely for this purpose. It's the big story. He won the Royal Rumble. Like this is obviously going to happen. This is Daniel Bryan winning at WrestleMania 30 or any of those kind of things. So to see the heel beat him was like made me really wonder, like, where is this going from here on out now? So I was pretty excited about that. I didn't get to go to Money in the Bank in England last year, but I did get to go to the SmackDown the night before. And just getting to go to a WWE event outside of North America was awesome. I wish I could have went to Money. Tickets were just absurd. But going to that SmackDown was pretty cool because, like, just again going to WWE and seeing it outside of the United States or outside of Canada is a pretty cool thing, because everything when you leave North America, it's like vastly different. So then when you're seeing these same people you recognize and you're like, hey, I know you from the States or wrestling fans, and you recognize a wrestling fan even, and you're like, everything here is literally completely the other way and so different, and you feel completely like you're in another country. And then you go to a WWE event and you're like, oh, I'm at WWE. Nobody here speaks the English I'm used to speaking, and the sodas they don't drink is the same soda or the same beer or anything like that. And prices are all different. Like when you go to the merch table, it's all in pounds. But it's the same.
Right.
It's cool. It's like when you go see your favorite sports team on the road. It's like, that's them. I follow them, and here I am in this new environment. But I have that familiarity there. I think that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I've never really thought about that either. But it's cool that WWE kind of brings everything back home. You know what I mean? For everybody there, which is really cool. Now, speaking about you going all over the world and big promotions, little promotions, being kind of around Central New York and knowing about wrestling around here and growing up into wrestling around here, how do you feel about CNY wrestling promotions and how the organizations around here just doing so well right now?
I was part of the ring crew back in the day and helped out and had a lot of friends with 2CW Wrestling. And I will say that when that was running, was the best one of the best, if not the best, indie promotion running in the country. And I wasn't just being biased, but like I saw the production and what they put into that company to both have homegrown people, but also bring in like the WWE guys, but also have it to an extent that a lot of indie shows, if you go to them, they're heavy on just bringing in some old WWE or WCW guy and then like just promoting the card around them and their one time, but like having someone come in like an AJ Styles, like winning the belt in 2CW back in the day was like, like wild, and having like AJ Styles versus Kevin Owens in like your main event of a pay-per-view.
2CW, yeah, for sure.
It was awesome. The promotions right now, I think are really well. There's the new promotion, One Up Wrestling in Central New York,
which is killing it.
It's doing pretty well. I would like, I guess my one complaint is there's just a lot of promotions, and that's where 2CW kind of covered a lot of ground. But they're, I think they're all well put together. I just hope that they don't kind of cannibalize themselves in one way. You got Excite out of Binghamton, you got Immortal out of the Utica Rome area, you got Dynasty out of Albany, which would come over to the Utica Rome area before. You have One Up Wrestling in Central New York. You still have wrestling like Ground Zero, and I think it's Wild Zero Wrestling out of Rochester, Syracuse. I don't know where they call themselves home. Ground Zero, I think, is mostly Rochester. But I would say if you're looking, and it's not local, but it comes around locally. If you're looking for the ECW of today, you got to be watching GCW.
GCW, yeah. Shout out everybody at GCW. I mean, that's one of my favorite independents right now. I mean, Zilla Fatu going crazy in there. We got Nick in there. I mean, everybody there, and I mean even Cardona right now as like the general manager of it. I mean, it's nuts, and I do love how it's like hardcore too, and it's like lets the fans in close. I'm thinking about going to the one in Asbury Park that's coming up. Just something I want to do. I've never been to the home.
I've been. What GCW shows have you been to?
None.
Okay. Well, I will say that I've been to a few now. So I went to my first GCW show last year, the night before SummerSlam, and I was hooked. I mean, I'd known about it, watched a little bit of it, but I went to the one in Detroit, and I was absolutely hooked. It was like the feel of an independent wrestling show I've never been to before. There's no guardrails. There's no like way to come in the ring where like they're boxing you off. It's just wrestlers come out and they're in the crowd. But it was, like I said, it was hardcore. It was 1,000 degrees in the building, which was super uncomfortable, but was super awesome at the same time because it was just that raw energy, and that literally couldn't be any further away. If you were coming into town for SummerSlam and you were going to bring your kid there thinking that this is like an auxiliary event to it, it was like wrestling, but like it's like if you go to see an Avengers movie, but then the night before you go to Sundance to see some sort of avant-garde documentary. They're like completely different, but they're both movies. So I was hooked. I will, though, say then I went to the one the night before Royal Rumble in Florida, and I was kind of taken back a little bit because of the fact that it wasn't as hardcore. They weren't using light tubes literally at all. But I will say, so the where the event takes place probably has something to do with it. I imagine New Jersey. I would love to see it there. And I was told even too in Tampa that you got to catch it in places like New Jersey more than New York. So if you're going to go to like either Atlantic City or Brooklyn, pick Atlantic City because New York is a little more stricter. I went to the GCW show in Rochester a few months ago, and that was like a mix. But I think the problem is, and I think that's why this is really like ECW was back in the day. A lot of people love ECW and they really romanticize the past. But you have to remember that it was a weekly show, and not everything was a death match. Not everything was hardcore. A lot of things were way more than WWE. And that's why I think GCW is because it's a traveling promotion. It's known all over the country. It's going to Hawaii even upcoming, which I think is crazy. I'd love to go see it there.
Hell yeah!
But it does have a mix where it's got some decent wrestling. That's not all death matches, but then it can bring out the death match at the same time. And I will say, I went to Detroit and it was amazing. And it's kind of making me find out more about the locations when I go to these GCW shows about what they can and can't get away with. Because I said Tampa, a little disheartening. I'm glad that wasn't my first. But when I went to GCW in Detroit, I mean, just the idea, like, I love that Detroit has that attitude. It has that reputation. It was in like a music venue that, back in the day was like where Eminem got his start kind of place. And it was in a venue like that, 100-degree night, like death match, but also like you had the athleticism of Speedball Mike Bailey and people like that. You had Jeff Hardy show up quickly on the card. It was just this complete awesome mix. And it has kind of made me want to go to GCW shows like the night before WWE shows from here on out.
That's amazing. I'm excited for my first GCW match for sure. And like I said, hopefully it's at the legendary home of ECW. But so it's been great talking to you. You do a lot of different wrestling content. I'd like you to let the people and viewers know how to find it and how to follow you before we sign off.
The podcast is easy wherever you find the social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Just add Heel to the Face. That's the most important spot. I try to post as many things about wrestling as I can. To be honest, if we didn't have the weekly podcast, I might do more just like individual videos about things. But I think the difference is, I love talking about wrestling, but the one thing you'll get out of me is sometimes I notice some things. If you want a podcast where they just talk about like the in-ring technicians, maybe that we're not the best place to go. But if you're looking at things where I noticed the lighting, I noticed the stage, I noticed why they picked this city over that city, similar to like what I noticed about Minneapolis becoming SummerSlam host in 2026 is it opened my eyes to the fact that WrestleMania in 2026 is going to be somewhere very unique and different. They're not just going to be in Atlanta. They're not going to be in Chicago. It's not going to be unique because the fact that Minneapolis was essentially up until 4 months ago the lock for WrestleMania 41. And now WWE is telling us that it's not even in the running for WrestleMania 42. We're 2 years away, but we already know that it's not in the running. We already know we're not picking Minneapolis. Makes me think that there's going to be something unique. And I heard somebody saying something today that maybe SummerSlam is 2 nights in 2026 because WrestleMania, if it's in Saudi Arabia, we know it wouldn't have the same tie, the same feel. Maybe that will be like America's WrestleMania that year, knowing that they're going to go to Saudi Arabia and maybe not have the WrestleCons and the conventions and the things that go along with it, so that Minneapolis will essentially be WrestleMania 2026 based on where their location is. So I'm just saying, stay tuned to things like that, in our podcast, talking about, like I said, the ticket sales and the schematics of events and add Heel to the Face. That's where you can find it. But, been watching wrestling for now 25 years and don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
Well, Jared, I appreciate you doing this with me, man, and happy to have you back anytime.
All right, man. It was good talking wrestling with you.
Make sure to subscribe. Hell in the Pod.
Thanks for watching Hell in the Pod, the culturally extreme wrestling podcast.